said, I spent over 30 years in banking, primarily in the commercial bank at Bank of America. And when I left, I became a certified International Coaching Federation coach. So that's pretty much where I am right now. I love helping out the 100 entrepreneurs. I love doing the dog tag bakery workshops. Okay, so yeah, today we're going to talk about all the aspects of financing or funding, basically a startup. This is not, I'll talk a little bit more about bank loans, but mostly this is for startups. So the first thing that I always advise people to do is figure out what your structure is. And a lot of startups start as a sole proprietor, and I really recommend against that because you don't have a corporate veil to protect you if you have some sort of litigation. And a sole proprietor is something like John Doe doing business as Acme, widgets. So you can have a partnership, which is one step above that. It does give you the corporate veil, but sometimes it's a little bit more complicated than something as simple as a limited liability corporation. And the reason I like an LLC is if you're the single manager in an LLC and you can do that, you don't have to file a separate tax return for that LLC. You can file it as a Schedule C on your personal tax return. If you have more than one member in your LLC, then you do have to file a corporate tax return. And what will happen is you'll get individual K-1s associated with that. And it's a pass-through entity. So basically, you're taxed on the income that passes through to you. And there's two types of corporations. Most startups aren't going to have a C corporation. If you're going to have a corporation, it might be an S corporation. The biggest advantage to that is that your income comes in the form of dividends. So the business income is taxed at the corporate level, but it's much more structured. You're required to have certain number of meetings a year. It's not really a very conducive structure for one or two members if you're starting your business with just a small group of people. And so the entity that you pick may in fact impact your ability to get financing down the road. So it's something you should think about. So after you figured out what structure you want, then my recommendation is to put together a business plan. And believe me when I say you do not need a 30-page business plan. You need something very simple, very concrete, and very to the point. Executive summary that's one page long, what's your business? Why is that a business? What need is your business fulfilling? Um, and that's really all you need in the executive summary. And the next part of that, the market analysis, is something I see many people don't do. And that is figure out what is the market for what you're selling or buying. Is it a $20 million market or is it a $20 billion market? And understanding exactly who your competition is and asking yourself the question, why you? What makes you different? And then the next part is the part Amanda always helps us with, which is the marketing strategy. So determining who your customer is going to help you define what your marketing strategy is. So if you're selling to a bunch of millennials and Gen Zs, then you're certainly going to have to be very up to date on social media. But if you're selling to baby boomers, you're going to be using a completely different marketing strategy. And then, of course, as a banker, it's really important that you put together some sort of sources and uses. And it's helpful to have a projected budget for your business, which is one of the things that Amanda and I do through the Dog Tag Bakery workshops is that we help them put together basically a profit and loss, figuring out how much money you plan to make. It's not critical you go out more than a year because frankly, as a startup, it's not that um, meaningful because you really don't know what you're going to be able to generate after the first year. And then the biography should not only include a little bit about your background, but if you have advisors that are part of your business, that it's really important to include who you've invited in to help you and what are their credentials. And that's all you need in the business plan. It doesn't have to be that extensive. Everything that's on this page could be done in 5 pages or less.
Cindy, it's amazing how many speakers we get that started their own businesses that have done none of these. And they've fallen into it almost by dumb luck and somehow worked their way through it. They eventually end up with it, but they don't start with it. Now, that's the wrong way to do it, but it happens.
No, I mean, I've seen it too, Bob. I mean, believe me, this is, uh, if you have a great idea and you just launch, then, more power to you. But you're going to have to at some point go back and do these things.
Right.
You don't necessarily need a business plan when you first launch, but when you go to try to get investors or you try to borrow money, then you're going to have to put something like that together. Okay. And then, and again, you may not do this up front, but you really should, and that's setting up some sort of accounting system. Now, for me in my coaching business, I use Google Sheets and I just put together a P&L. I send it to my accountant. He does a Schedule C for me. You don't have to spend a lot of money when you first start a business, but you really do have to set up some sort of accounting system, whether it's Google Sheets, Microsoft Online, QuickBooks. If your business is fairly complicated, you may want to reach out to a local accounting firm and see if they have a bookkeeping service. Those are usually cheaper than hiring a full-fledged accountant. And then making sure you have all of your state and local permits and licenses. You may need to hire an attorney to prepare contracts for you. It depends on what your business is. Whatever documents you need to have them up front. It's really important for you to basically complete what we say in banking is a personal financial statement, which is just listing out all of your financial resources. What's your bank accounts, what's your assets, your liabilities. And then how much do you need to cover your monthly expenses or your yearly expenses every year? How much does your business have to generate just to break even and cover your expenses? And then making sure you don't necessarily need a website, but you should have a name for your business and reserve that domain. Whether you use it right away or not, at least lock it in. It's fairly cheap. You can go to GoDaddy and type it in and see if anybody else has it. Okay, so now we're getting to how you get your money. So if you go outside of what you personally have, you have to have some skin in the game. You don't want to I've had this conversation when we were working at Walter Reed. I used to have people always say, well, I got all this money from when I first, left the military. Should I dump it all into my business? And I was always like, no, absolutely not. You should never put 100% of your own personal cash in. So you want to make sure your funds are easily accessible. If you don't, if it's possible to get a loan and actually pledge your cash versus putting your cash in, you want to do that. So those are your personal resources, some of your own personal cash, maybe you pledge some cash or stocks that you have. And if you don't have that resource, then it's not unusual to use credit cards. Something like 13% of all the small businesses use credit cards to start up their business. But make sure you look for cards that don't require a personal guarantee and also give you at least 9 months of interest-free credit. And almost all of them will give you some cash back. So you want to look for those as well. I put these two in. There are many, many more. You definitely need to do your research if you're going to finance with credit cards. But it's really critical that you don't miss a payment on those business cards. And then a lot of, really almost 40% of small businesses use friends and family. And the average investment coming from this source is about $25,000. The thing about friends and family is you don't want to just go to Uncle Joe and say, "Hey, I'm starting this business. Will you give me 5 grand?" That is absolutely the wrong thing to do. You want to prepare basically an offering memorandum that you would do if you were getting an outside arm's length investor, which includes the business plan, how much you need, what you're going to use the money for, and how much equity are you going to give up, um, or how much interest are you going to pay them if they're actually loaning you the money versus throwing money in as equity. It's really important that you don't ask friends or family that can't lose 100% of the money they're investing, because what you're doing is very risky. And they have to be fully aware that it's money they can lose. And then if they do invest in you, it's really important that you give them, at a minimum, semi-annual, if not quarterly updates on the business.
Yeah.
But if you want to be an entrepreneur, there's nothing wrong with thinking about buying an ongoing profitable business, because that is the one thing you actually can get bank financing for.
Okay.
Yeah, I once financed Marriott used to own Roy Rogers, right? Remember that?
Long time ago.
And then one of my clients was he ran one of the Roy Rogers, and he was a minority owner. And they were selling off all of their Roy Rogers, and he wanted to buy his. And so what we did with him was a SBA, what they call a SBA 504. And so it's like a 50-40-10. He has to put in 10%, and we can talk about the SBA stuff later, but he had to put in 10%. The bank puts in 40% and the SBA puts in 50%. It's a great program for buying something that's sort of an ongoing established business.